Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle and Joy, and I've seen almost nothing.
And we're here for a movie night this week. We have finished Gravity Falls, and now we're watching a horror movie because I just wanted to watch a horror movie. And that's it.
There is a good amount of horror in Gravity Falls. It's not entirely unrelated.
Not entirely unrelated.
Not to entirely skip to the very end of this movie, but much like Gravity Falls, this movie is all about family.
It is. It's true. It is, in fact, all about family.
And so, clearly, this was actually a very intentional decision on our part.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
100%. 1%. Definitely one. At minimum one. But yes, today, friends, we are talking about The Haunting, which is a 1999 supernatural horror film, which has a lot of 1999 on it, I think. I think Owen Wilson is just made for 90s.
I'm so glad you started with Owen Wilson, because I was about to say, very 90s feel, starting with the cast. The entire cast, not even just Owen Wilson.
This is true.
Like when Catherine Zeta-Jones shows up, I was like, oh, it's the 90s. The eyebrows are very 90s. It's all very 90s. It's all good.
The eyebrows are very 90s. We definitely, Liam Neeson probably straddled the 90s to the aughts a little bit there.
Yeah. And in this movie, he had one moment in this movie where he took a half step into his Taken persona. But, Liam Neeson wasn't quite there yet in 1999.
No, yeah. Right, exactly. This is before Taken. This is before he was just known as the man with a very particular set of skills. But yeah, so this movie is based on The Haunting of Hill House, which is a 1959 novel by Shirley Jackson. So It does have some, it has what I call growing pains from, sorry, there's a moth. Where are the cats when I need them? It's fine. The movie, I think, has some growing pains from the novel to being a feature film.
I was curious about, I did literally no research on this, but I was kind of curious about the source material here, because when I was Googling to figure out, where do I stream this movie, I saw that there was a 1960s version and this version. Have you seen the 60s version?
I have not.
Oh, I was curious about
how kind of a travesty.
I was curious about how similar they are.
Yeah,
probably.
I think we can probably watch that as a second, a non-double feature, double feature. Maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll watch that the next time we watch a movie.
So this was based loosely off of a book, which, great, is a very, very 90s movie. Should we attempt to summarize it before we hop into the meat of the movie?
Sure. I think, famous last words, I'm going to try and do this succinctly. But essentially a doctor of the science of fear, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure what his actual title is.
Listen,
but
what he says. That's what he says his title is. So we have no choice but to accept it.
So whatever his actual PhD is in whatever, what he wants it to be is the science of fear, which I've read pieces of the book. I haven't read the entire thing. I'm so sorry, listeners. I'm really bad at reading books. I'm actually currently listening to the audio novel of it, which I highly recommend. It's really well read. Anyway, in the book, it's very much like he got a degree as close as he possibly could towards supernatural things, not necessarily fear. And in the book, it's not collection of insomniacs. He's actually trying to gather together people who have adjacent supernatural tendencies and bring them to a haunted house to kind of see what happens and see if they can capture, proof, basically.
Oh, proof of whether the house is haunted or not.
Correct.
You know what? this, what you're describing is very similar to what I am reading is the plot of the 1960s movie. So it seems like
so
they
much
decided
more accurate,
to put sort
I guess.
of a 90s spin on the 90s version of The Haunting.
Yeah,
and
I will say there's more, I feel like in the 90s, too many people were more into, like, maybe the place is haunted than maybe in 1960. So, so I feel like they had to sort of adjust it to be, hey, this is a sleep study and we're going to see what fear does to the human psyche, as opposed to you might be coming to a haunted house.
Right.
And you might get people who are like, oh, a haunted house, you know.
I also think, not that this is particular to the 90s, but I also think that there was something about 90s movies and movies that came out around that time. Like, I feel like every movie needed a twist.
Yes. Every movie needed
a twist, right? And I feel like I don't actually know when that started, but in my life, 90s movies is roughly when that started for me. And
we're like a year away from Saw.
Right. And so I think it makes sense that they were like, no. It can't be a group of people who's expecting maybe to see a haunted house and then in reality do find a haunted house, right? Like it has to be a group of people where it's like, oh, it's a ruse. It's an insomnia study. Dr. Morrow is clearly causing all of this, quote, paranormal activity to occur. And then the quote twist is that it's actually paranormal activity and it's not Dr. Morrow.
Exactly.
You know, Morrow, whatever.
Hard to say. It's also one of those things where, like, a guy who's trying to do a fear study, but he's not exactly doing anything else other than telling them a quote unquote creepy, fictitious story about the house they're staying in. And the house, by the way, is insane. Like,
I love the house.
The ceilings are huge in every room. There's animals, there's small children welded into the wood, and it's like, and you have a wall which is 2 doors, which I believe swing both ways, by the way, which yes. I can't confirm this, but you have like a gigantic wall which is actually doors, which is a mural of purgatory.
There is so much in this house that actually just makes no sense.
Yes.
Very much like an amusement park twisted. What is the name of that amusement park attraction where you walk through and there's like the Hall of Mirrors?
Like a fun house.
Yes, yes, exactly. It's very, very fun house. I mean, literally with the carousel room, right? Mm-hmm. But like, it's not just fun house. There are also just things that aesthetically don't make sense. Like, yes, the children's faces, blah, blah, but also, like, randomly spikes sticking out of the ceiling, like, randomly a
decorative
wall.
Decorative spikes.
Randomly decorative mini chains. Just a curtain of chains.
I forgot about the curtain of chains. Well, okay,
Why?
So the curtain of chains, I believe, only shows up in this giant fireplace. The fireplace, by the way, that you can walk into and your head still won't hit the top of it. Like, I don't know who, like, Hugh Crane was like, you know what I want in my home? A bonfire. I want a bonfire as tall as it could possibly be.
To burn the bodies of the children.
To burn the of children who are, in theory, are half his size, maybe smaller.
So really what this house is it's like a horrible combination of an amusement park fun house and that actual murder house. Do you know what I'm talking about? The house, the place that one serial killer built that was like, it looked like a hospital, but then when you entered into it, there were all of these little secret passageways and he would use the house to murder people. Everyone listening to this podcast is like, Danielle, I know exactly who you're talking about. They're like yelling at their phones. But my ability to retrieve names at this point in the evening.
My brain is not 100% with you, but I keep thinking I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to continue to summarize the plot because we got 1/10 of the way through the plot.
I know.
And I am going to Google this gentleman.
Sure, fair. Yes. You take care of that. I will continue on. Which, by the way, just to finish my real quick point about about the chain wall. I believe as someone who lives in a house with a fireplace, I believe those chains are meant to keep, cinders and things from flying out. I think they have this chain, literally it's like a bunch of chain link that you slap in front of a fireplace.
You're not wrong, because it is reminiscent of those little screens that people would have in front of fireplaces, right? Or those little decorative screens that you could put in front of yourself if you wanted to sit by the fire and embroider something.
Now, the reason you think it's a wall is because the fireplace is too tall and too large. That's why you think it's a wall. But yes, so for the rest of the plot, he invites Theo, who is a artist, media mogul, etc., etc. He invites, who is, oh God, I don't even know what he does for a living. I just know he's a basic tosser turner and played by a Wilson.
It doesn't matter.
Literally.
He's played by Owen Wilson, but his character name is Luke, which is confusing because the actual brother is Luke Wilson.
I'm pretty sure that's literally what my brain did of trying to figure out, wait, which Wilson am I talking about? I'm not going to say the wrong one before I look at the name again. But yeah, the last one, which is Eleanor Vance, who is a very sort of somewhat, see, this is where it gets interesting, because book Eleanor and movie Eleanor are slightly different. Book Eleanor is very sort of, I mean, the negative term is mousy. Very small spoken, very
demure.
Demure, yeah. She's very people pleasery, but she also makes up stories. You know, like the thing about her apartment with the lions and the garden, that's directly from the book. And she does that all the time. You know, and she has this very creative brain, and she definitely does create these big theatrical stories for herself. So in some ways, as the reader, and while you're watching The Haunting, you can kind of be like, oh, well, she could be just creating this in her brain because she is a very visually creative, it's just, she could just be creating her own reality, right?
Yeah.
It could just be in that. And I think the movie one plays it a little less that. They play up more that she's just very happy to be free of her mother, which again is also in the book of, she was taking care of her mother for a minimum of 11 years, but the way she tells it, basically her entire life. And her mother finally passed away. And now she's arguing with her sister as to whether or not she can actually just stay in the apartment that she's lived in.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, I had completely forgotten that we meet Hill House first. It's the first shot we get in the movie, but then we get exactly two scones of not Hill House.
Right.
And they're all about how crappy Eleanor's life is.
Right. Just a tiny, a tiny little taste of her backstory.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, I do think it is important that we know this about her. Right? Mm-hmm. That she is exactly the kind of person who would take care of her dying mother for what sounds like decades.
Yeah.
Only to have the house that she loves ripped away from her by her sister the instant the mother passes away.
Yeah. And it's in the book, there's this, the very opening is sort of her having an argument with her sister, but not about the apartment, about the car, which she paid for half of. And she's like, but half of it's mine. I'm taking the car. And they're like, I don't think you should drive. And she's like, no, I'm taking the car. I am taking the car. It's pages of her just repeating that. You know what I mean? And I think I think you get the sense that people just mow her over.
Uh-huh.
And that she doesn't, she either doesn't have the language to stick up for herself or doesn't have just doesn't have a very commanding presence, which again is that like mousy term, which by the way, I hate using the term mousy. But I feel like in 1959, I feel like Shirley Jackson is like, I mean, I made her to be mousy to begin with, so don't worry about it. But like she does, you know, she is basically our protagonist for all things.
Yes.
For the book, for this movie. And she arrives in Hill House with the rest of these people. And as soon as she hears the story of Hill House, she like sort of actually before that even happens, when it's just her and Theo in the house, like they explore on their own. And so she starts seeing all these wild rooms that we were just describing a second ago. Oh, and Dr. Morrow shows up with his two assistants, one of whom gets injured almost immediately, and
Mary.
The two assistants leave.
Mary at least has a few lines. You know, she reviews files with Dr. Morrow. She's one of the few people who actually raises a red flag about this house, which is wild. Poor Todd, I think says not even one word. Maybe
I don't think he had one line.
But
in the whole thing.
I just like, while we're talking about everyone arriving at this house for the first time, I feel like I have to say none of Eleanor's reactions to anything make any sense to me.
Oh, really? Like what?
Like getting a call randomly about going to a house right when she's looking for a house. Fine. I will accept that. I think that is probably the last reasonable response that she has. Because from that point, she's like the only one who is first of all, she arrives at this house. She's looking for Mrs. Dudley and Mr. Dudley. Mr. Dudley is immediately fishy. Mrs. Dudley walks her to her bedroom, and the name of her bedroom is the Red Room. That's very ominous. I would not want to sleep in the Red Room. She opens the door to the Red Room. It's decorated with children's faces, as Joy said earlier. This plush red velvet everywhere, and her first reaction is, "This is beautiful." And I'm like, "No, it's not, honey. It's scary. This is not a beautiful space."
This is a terrifying room.
It's dripping in red and children's faces and random spikes. And that's her reaction to the rest of the house. Oh, look, a wall that looks like a mirror, but it's not a mirror. You can walk through it. That's just fun. A random carousel room where once the walls and the doors close, you can't figure out the way out because all of the walls and doors are actually mirrors.
Yeah, no, listeners, literally Danielle
fun.
And I's nightmare.
Like,
what do you mean I'm locked in a room with freaking Calliope music and I can't find the exit? What?
That's what I mean.
And I'm surrounded by mirrors and the floor is moving.
And the floor is moving.
Literally
and
my nightmare.
Thing is, like, I know that Catherine Zeta-Jones's character, Theo, is also just sort of enamored with the space, but that she's at least enamored in the space in sort of a morbid way. Like, she has
she walked in and was just like, this is insane.
Yes, exactly. Like, at least she's enamored with it, but because she thinks it's wild, because she thinks it's creepy, because she's like, none of this makes sense. That makes more sense to me than Eleanor, who's just like, this is beautiful. It's not.
It's not.
It's
Eleanor.
not.
Eleanor, no. Come back to us. No, yeah, Eleanor, this is where I think the struggle kind of happens between having book Eleanor be on screen in the same way that really quick Twilight tangent. I read all the Twilight books. I don't particularly recommend them, but that's only because I also don't like romance novels particularly much.
Oh, so fair. Yeah.
It's not my genre, but more or less I read them to understand the zeitgeist of the time in which Twilight had been a thing. Now, I also watched the movies, and I will say it's very interesting to see the shift of, like, you are in Bella's head in the book, and so the things that happen in the movies have a completely different take because you don't actually know what she's thinking behind it.
Yeah.
And I get this way with Nell, because Eleanor in the book is very like, she is constantly, and I mean constantly, trying to think of the right thing to say.
Oh.
She's always looking for, okay, I need to be polite, and I can't. There's actually a line in the book where Theo says something like, I think you're confusing foolishness with wickedness, where, like, you know, you can be silly and you can be a little, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to constantly be on your A game.
Yeah.
And if you tumble backwards a little bit, you're not wicked. Like, that's not bad.
Right.
And it's like trying to get that through to Eleanor is like screaming at a brick wall.
Interesting.
So I wonder if a lot of her, like, this is beautiful, this is lovely, is because, like, well, when you walk into a home, you have to tell, you know, like, you have to be polite and you have to say these things. But
I would accept that, except that she just continues to exhibit this behavior for the remainder of the movie. Again, like, not to skip ahead, but there's literally a scene where, you know, one of the shadowy children things.
Sure, yeah.
Things that, you know, takes shape.
You can call them ghosts. It's 100% a ghost.
A ghost that, like, you know, takes shape in the curtains and takes shape in the bed sheets. Like, swims up through the bed sheets until
to, like, talk to her
until it's
on
like
the side
lying
of the pillow,
next to her. And okay, so she wakes up and the first thing she sees is a child's face formed in a bed sheet, and she's just like, no reaction. She's like, oh, look, a child in a bedsheet is looking at me. And then she just, like, calmly gets out of bed and closes the window. I'm sorry, what?
I know.
No.
I do think there is again, I know when they were making this movie that there was definitely some kind of disconnect somewhere. I don't know if it was, like, script writer to, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if they had stopgaps or they had placeholders that just ended up making it into the final cut, which happens all the time.
Fair, yeah.
But, like, you know, not great. Not great.
Yeah, okay. Speaking of inside thoughts and outside thoughts.
Yes.
Is the chemistry between Nell and Theo anywhere in the book? Or did they put that in the movie?
So here's where, okay, put a pin in that. Write it down somewhere. Write it down somewhere.
I'm not going to forget the chemistry between two of the main characters.
The chemistry question between two of the main characters. Between two of the four humans we spend the most time with in this entire movie.
I will not forget to talk about the OTP of this movie.
That's fair. So what, basically what ends up happening is Dr. Moreau feeds them this story and they absorb it, they listen to it, they understand it, and then weird things start to happen to them. Not only as individuals, like I think the first weird thing happens to Theo and Nell when they're in the same room together. So it's almost like, you know, they're not, it's not this insanity of like, and then we're isolated and we experience these things.
No, you're right. Because like the first thing, well, actually the first thing
is like the banging
is the thing we already mentioned, which is when the harpsichord string breaks and like slices Mary's Mary's eye open.
Yeah,
I will say
we know that's weird, but the people in the movie could like brush it aside and be like, well, the harpsichord's probably old. She strummed it. Maybe, you know, like you could almost wave that away.
Before we move on from the story, I have to add that to the list of things that Eleanor does not respond in a normal way to. Because he tells this very creepy story that ends with, townspeople hear the sounds of children coming from the house at night. What is Eleanor's reaction? That's so sad. Eleanor, no. Okay, anyway,
Mom,
so,
wake up, baby, wake up.
You're right. The first weird thing that happens is Eleanor hears voices, and then she hears the pounding, and it turns out that Theo can hear the pounding as well, but Luke does not.
And Dr. Moreau did not either. This is also a theme in the book, where it's like, the women will hear something and the men will sort of explain it away. Like, that's a pretty common theme in the book also. Luke is a little
interesting.
more...
Was that
Luke
intentional?
in the book is also a completely different character. Like, he's related to the Cranes who own the house. So he's not even there as like an invitation of someone who's sensitive. He's just there because a representative of the house needs to be there on the grounds. So he is almost, and I don't know if it's like a closer in age thing where he's just like, no, I mean, you heard what you heard. But, Dr. Montague in the book is like 100% like, it was probably the wind. Like, definitely bulldozing over like everything that happens to them, or at least so far as I've read.
Yeah.
But
okay, wait. So that we have time to like dive in deeper and talk about the themes. Like,
sure,
that's the setup of the movie, right? Like, weird stuff starts happening, and then the remainder of the movie is precisely what we've basically already summarized, which is that the main conflict in the movie is it actual paranormal activity, or is Dr. Marrow conducting an experiment and causing all of this? And at the end of the day, we discover that it is actual paranormal activity.
Actual paranormal activity.
Then, of course, is resolved.
Resolved in the weirdest way. It's fine.
Yeah, which we'll get to.
We'll talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that. We'll see if we have time.
Generally, what stuff did you want to talk about?
Let's go back to your, like, the chemistry between Theo and Eleanor.
Is it in the book? Tell me.
I read it that way in the book. Now, I don't know if I read it as, like, a very... there is a phenomenon that sometimes happens, like, when it's just women in the room, like, they will... And it doesn't always happen, and it doesn't always happen with very specific women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No woman is a monolith. But usually, especially in media, the women will just instantly bond. That's what happens in the book.
Okay.
Like, they are the first people there. They are, like, the first to talk to each other, the first to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. Like, Theo is the first person to understand that just Eleanor in the book, by the way. Eleanor makes up stories and, like, has this very vivid imagination, and she feeds into it. And in the book, Eleanor is I forget what it's called. They didn't call it this in the book, but there's a specific name. I think it's like kinetic psychic or something, where it's like your emotions actually manifest physically, like in your environment.
Oh.
Eleanor, when she was a kid, got angry or something. No, sorry. She experienced the grief of losing her father all at once. Mm-hmm. And like rocks and stones poured from the heavens and like caused property damage. Now in the book, Dr. Montague tells her this and is just like, well, when you were a child, this happened. And she gets very afraid and defensive. And she's like, no. I don't know what you're talking about. My mother told me that the neighbors were throwing rocks. And so you get this feeling that like you don't know if like she's just been sheltered or she's just been gaslit into thinking that she doesn't have any kind of power. Mm-hmm. But you definitely get a sense of like she has either been lied to or been like people have tried to steer her in a completely different direction from this thing that happened to her. And Theo is literally just like mildly psychic, like mildly telepathic, and like adjusts to the people around her.
And so Theo is able to, like, does Theo think that, in the books, does Theo think that Eleanor is just delusional, or is she able to figure out whether it was real, or is it like...
Theo is the most, again, I haven't finished it, but Theo is the most, like, on Eleanor's side.
Gotcha.
Like, when something happens, Theo is also the first person to be like, can't you see she's, like, upset? You know, like, where the men will just be completely dismissive. And so I don't know if it's, like, she actually believes it, or if there is a part towards the beginning of the book, actually, where she just kind of looks at Eleanor and she's just like, I think you should leave. I think you would be safer if you left.
Oh, interesting.
And like Eleanor gets very like, you know, because again, she's finally a free spirit. She's like, she can do whatever she wants. She doesn't even have to go to Hill House, you know, like she could run away and do something else. Like she's very like, I am choosing what I want to do. So of course, when Theo says that, she's like, no, I want to be here. You know, how dare you?
Okay. So you're saying like there's maybe chemistry just because they connect instantly and understand each other, but in maybe and they were roommates way. Not in the way.
I will say there's zero connection with Luke for either of them.
Well, I mean,
like
of course.
Eleanor has like, but like Luke doesn't even try in the book is what I'm saying. Like
okay.
Luke is not Owen Wilson in the book. There's definitely a, you know, like Eleanor kind of has like a moment of like, am I supposed to fall in love with this person? Which is how I read it. Like, it's a very, like, are we supposed to get together? In that same kind of way that, like, you know, almost a very naive, like, they're the two leads in the school play. Are they going to start dating now? Like, that's what it feels like. It has that energy where she's just like, because she also keeps turning over and over in her brain this, like, phrase from a song. The story ends... Like, the story begins in lovers meeting or something. Mm-hmm. She's, like, turning it over and over again in her head. And, like, she runs into him, and then she's like, oh, is this lovers meeting? And I'm like, sweetie, you don't know him. You don't know him.
Comp het.
Comp het. Comp het. Which gets to the other thematic thing of the reason why I wanted to show Danielle this movie, because I can't describe it other than this movie feels very subtly rainbow-esque
Well,
in the first, like, 45-ish minutes. Like, until there's the message painted in blood. I feel like then suddenly we're in a very different film. But before that,
if in the books, whatever was happening with Eleanor and Theo was very like, oh, maybe they're just friends. Like, oh, maybe they just like each other. Maybe they just get each other because they're women. No. In the movie, the attraction happens instantly and is very obvious. Like, it is... It's not subtle.
It's not subtle.
It is not subtle. In fact,
I do really love when Eleanor, like, turns around. Eleanor does the dude thing.
Actually, wait. When that happens, it is absolutely in my notes that she goes, oop, and she turns around because she gets embarrassed. But actually, I feel like the cherry on top of the thing is when Theo reaches to take a hair off of Eleanor's shirt, and Eleanor's like, ah! You know, it's sort of like... You know, someone attractive is close to me, sort of.
So now
that it's like,
so I feel a little bit like it's cheating, but I have, and again, I was watching this in 1999. I only had the like, I only had bisexual as a reference. I do feel like if this was made today, Catherine Zeta-Jones, like Theo, would 100% just be pansexual.
Oh,
although
100%. Fun
story in the Haunting of Hill House, the TV show, they made Theo a lesbian, and which I kind of really enjoyed watching because not only is she a lesbian, she's like, I think at one point one of the characters describes her like, you're worse than a frat guy because like she doesn't form serious relationships with these women. They're all one night stands, like all of them. And I'm just like, oh, but you're a disaster lesbian. And that's actually kind of great. But if I'm not mistaken, I will say, I think Theo is, I might be mistaken about this. I'll have to double check it. Listeners,
in what?
If
the
I'm
movie
wrong.
Or the book?
In the book, I feel like Theo is canonically bisexual because I feel like we hear about both the boyfriend and the girlfriend in the book.
Certainly the boyfriend and the girlfriend are mentioned in the movie.
Yeah. So, like, I do think like the queer Shirley Jackson knew what she was doing, is the point I'm trying to make. I'm just like, Shirley Jackson was like, I don't know about everybody else, but Theo is queer. Theo's queer. Done and dusted.
Definitely stated explicitly, canonically, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think so is Eleanor.
I think she's queer. What flavor of queer do you think Eleanor is?
What flavor? We will never know. I don't know. But, like, when I saw that panic, I was like, I recognize that panic.
So when I was younger, I thought she was ace. But like a romantic. I thought it was the kind of thing where she was just like, she was looking to kind of like, for someone to hold her into the night, you know?
Very fair. So, not aromantic, but asexual.
Asexual, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
She clocked as asexual to me. I don't, again, we will never know.
It's hard to say, because I could kind of see that because the movie makes her out to be such an, quote, that I know that this is not great. I don't like the use of this word. And I can't think of another way to explain it right now. Like, the movie frames her as such a, quote, innocent character.
Yeah.
That I wonder whether that might be a little
sheltered
bit
better?
Like, maybe, but, you know, like the reality is, it's like, you know, just because you're ace doesn't mean you, like, don't ever think about any of that stuff. You know?
I know.
So that's,
but we've had this conversation that for a long time, media does not understand, even into the 2016s. Media does not understand how to portray ace.
Exactly. Like in a 90s
I do have, like,
sense,
in my
I
brain,
can see
like,
why, like,
are
90s.
you closeted? You know, like, are you just closeted? I will say Eleanor in the book, like, clocks is straight, which to me is so sad because, like, she keeps looking at Luke and I'm like, are you though? But do you want that, or do you just, like, yearn for something?
I'm with you on this one. I think closeted makes a lot more sense to me in this movie.
Yeah.
Closeted something.
Insert queer. Insert queer into this line. Queer closet something.
Yeah, because, she's so deep in the closet, she doesn't even know.
Exactly.
That's what it is. She's so deep in the closet, she doesn't even know. She's just like, here's an attractive person. I didn't even
Somehow
know.
It's 1999 and she still hasn't checked out the internet. She still hasn't done one of those quizzes. Or whatever.
She's been too busy taking care of her mother.
She's been too busy taking care of her mom. But yeah, and obviously the Wilson character is the straight boy.
That none of the women pay any attention to.
I know. That's honestly my favorite part. My favorite part is, like, he swings and misses the whole movie.
Yeah.
The whole movie. One of my favorite things is, like, one of the first things he says to Theo is like, wow, you're so dominant.
And she just, doesn't even give him a minute. Does that
do it for you? But Theo is also just like, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. She's not only absolutely not, but I think my favorite thing about her is that not only is she absolutely not with Luke, but she's very casual with him in a way that really throws him off. Like when she wants him to get off the couch and she doesn't tell him, make room on this couch for me. She, like, taps him on the shoulder and is like, and makes a gesture like, move, you know, very casual. Like, she gets physical with him, but not in a way that shows that she's attracted to him. And then similarly, I think there's, like, another moment later, like, clearly I was really picking up on what this movie is putting down.
Right.
There's another
the
moment.
Important scenes.
This is the important stuff. Like, I don't know, ghosts, whatever. There's this other moment where I think that he says something, and I can't even remember what he says. But clearly it was meant to be a joke that fell flat. And she does the sibling thing where she straight, like, punches him in the shoulder.
This is
you've so
hit it.
Perfect.
You've hit it. It's Theo treats him like a brother.
Exactly. Casual,
like an
physical,
obnoxious
whatever,
brother.
like,
And it's just like Luke just keeps trying anything, and I'm just like, bro, it's not gonna happen.
No.
She has a boyfriend and a girlfriend. I feel like she's very satisfied.
Very satisfied, non-threatened, just, you know, that's Luke.
I guess Luke's over there. Luke exists. Yeah, no, it was very good to see and not have like concern is too strong a word, but like not feel like, and then they tumbled into bed together for dumb, you know what I mean? Like after knowing each other for 3 days. Like, no. Like Theo knew exactly where to put him, and he's on his shelf, and he will not come off his shelf because he knows what he did. I'm trying to think of a few of the other themes that I really like. So like that's the first part of this movie, I feel like has a lot of coded queerness about it. Mm-hmm. The second part of this movie is the horror story. Is like, is Nell or isn't Nell crazy? And I try not to use that word anymore, but literally that's the entire movie. Like,
it is the movie, because she's questioning her reality the entire time, including at the end when she somehow manifests her mother's bedroom inside of this haunted house, you know?
I know.
And wait, can we talk about, we have to talk about the ending of this movie.
Yes.
And the
we
fact
can definitely talk. Which part?
I feel like I was so caught up in everything else that when all of a sudden she was looking at the photo album and she recognized Caroline and she was like, Caroline was his second wife. It's like the movie leapfrogged over 3 things that it needed to tell us. Where did Carolyn even come from?
Or like the info dump she gives about how like, hey, I'm actually related to Hugh Crane.
Right.
And like
she's related
like
as
the
a great
nth
grandmother.
hour.
What the where did this come from? It just happened. I was like, what?
And this is where I feel like the movie drops the ball. I think the movie really drops the ball in Eleanor's relationship to this house.
Yes.
I feel like, I don't know if this movie was, you know, my wife and I have recently started saying, like, it felt like it was written by committee. This feels like it was written by committee, and they were trying to fit in 6 different plot lines, and it didn't quite work. You know, you got to pick a lane, especially in a film. Like, and, you know, I get it. I'm a writer. I struggle with this myself, but man, is it so obvious when it just doesn't work. I think all of that is extremely confusing. Honestly, I would have almost been happy with the she's here to protect the kids. She doesn't have a familial relationship to them. Like, the kids have chosen her, and she has chosen the kids, which is literally the thing that we learned about her in the very beginning of the movie. Of she has this, what was it, like a dependent disorder or something?
Yes, and it goes back to what you were saying before. Like, if they just categorized her as Eleanor in the books, right? And if she just was that character, and I think that actually did carry over into Act 1 of this movie, it makes perfect sense to me that someone like that would discover there was a group of children being hurt and would protect them just because there is a group of children being hurt. She did not have to be connected to the house. She didn't have to have that weird moment where she was like pregnant in her reflection. None of that needed to happen. Who even is Carolyn? Why is she here?
I know. Carolyn does.
Delete.
She feels really shoehorned in.
It could have been Renee all along.
I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, I think they were trying to figure out, like, well, the first wife died tragically. In the book, it is something genuinely very sad, where, like, the wife dies in, like, this horrible, like, carriage accident, like, 100 feet away from the house.
But, like, okay.
Like, she doesn't even get to step foot. Like, the house is just finished being built, and she was literally going to see it for the first time, and, like, she doesn't even see it for the first time. Like, it is relatively, it's pretty tragic. However, in the book, he literally has kids.
But they could have kept the story of the movie could have stayed 100% intact without Carolyn, right? Like, Hugh and Renee wanted a house full of children's laughter. Renee was never able to give birth to a child successfully, had a number of miscarriages, and then passed away. However they want to make it, right? Like, in the movie, they chose to say that she killed herself. Fine. Okay? That could have happened. However she dies, she dies. Then Hugh is like, well, how am I going to get my hands on children now? So then he starts kidnapping children from his mills, keeps them in his house with him, plays hide and seek with them. Weird. In his, like...
I mean, all of it's weird.
In his murder house, right? Like he traps them in this house. That this is why the mirrors make sense. This is why the hidden walls make sense. This is why like a room that you go into and then are trapped in makes sense, right?
Yeah. All of that can literally stay in.
All of that can stay in. And then when he's, I guess, tired of the kids or whenever the kids get too big or it's too easy for them to escape, he burns them in the giant furnace, right? So now you have a history of dead children in this house. And then Eleanor discovers that there are children who are hurting and dying and are souls that need to find rest. And then she scoops them up and helps them find rest. That's the movie.
I know.
No need for Carolyn.
I know.
That's the movie.
I think it came down to this really weird idea that, like, in order for her to feel at home, she had to have some kind of stake in the game. You could have even had the weird, like, they manifested my mother's bedroom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you could have even had that and been just like, well, they're ghosts. They just know things, you know?
It's her as a caretaker, right? It doesn't have to be her as a family member, her as a mother. It's just her as a caretaker.
It's literally like the ghost could have just like heard, like you could have just made it that she talks in her sleep and the ghost could have heard her talking and like tried to create this room for her. Like there's a bunch of things that I wish they did. Like I feel like this movie, and unfortunately the world agrees with me. This movie is like just to the left of center. Would you like to know about the accolades that are on Wikipedia?
Yeah, actually, I would.
It was nominated for a bunch of them. It only won one thing. But it was nominated for the Golden Raspberry Awards. Do you know what those are?
I know what the raspberries are. So, yes, I guess so.
Yeah, they're for bad movies.
Bad movies, yes. I know the raspberries.
It was nominated for Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actress, Worst Screenplay, Worst Screen Couple.
Wait,
which was Lily Taylor and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
What? I don't think they're the worst screen couple I've ever seen.
To be fair, it was only nominated. It didn't actually win those. But then it's the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards. Worst Sense of Direction. Which, by the way, I didn't know that was a thing, but I was like, actually, you got it.
Fantastic.
Worst screenplay for a film grossing over 100 million worldwide using Hollywood math. Worst remake, that's the one that it won, unfortunately. Least special effects.
It was very much like The Mummy 2. When The Rock becomes that, like, weird sort of scorpion thing.
Oh, yeah. Where you're just like, how does his torso connect to his body? Are we not talking about that? I guess we're not talking about that.
That is the level of CGI we see in this film.
Yes. I feel like we're at one more things because I know you gotta go. Do you have a one more thing?
I could probably find a million. I don't know. I know.
I feel like there's a lot we didn't talk about. I'm gonna say my one more thing is Catherine Zeta-Jones slapping Liam Neeson.
Okay, well that's the moment I was referring to, where I feel like Liam Neeson got a little taken. You know, like very angry. She slapped him.
And she slapped him because he wasn't making any sense. He was literally arguing with a woman about the fact that, like, he had every right to do this insanely bad, like, unethical thing. To, like, trap people in a mansion and the gate is locked and you can't leave. Like, this is literally kidnapping, my dude. And Theo's trying to call him on it, and he just starts yelling at her of like, I'm trying to figure out very important things, and she just slaps him straight across the face.
And you know what? If anyone was going to put Liam Neeson in his place at that time, it was Catherine Zeta-Jones, so I appreciate that.
More power to her. Oh, and my second one more thing is just that this introduced me to Lily Taylor, who, look, as much of a crap show as this movie is, I think Lily Taylor did the best with what she had. She was talking about it later, and she was just kind of like, you don't go into a movie thinking it's going to be bad. I don't know. I enjoyed my time making that movie. I don't know. Like it was a real, like, I feel like she really, thought it was going to do something, and then ended up getting so panned.
I know, poor her. But she did the best. She did the best she could with what she was given.
You did recognize her, right?
From what?
Almost
like what?
Human.
Oh, I was like, what have I seen that she's in? The problem is, like, I feel like I saw her face and I was like, oh, this is someone I've seen in a billion other things.
Right.
But the billion other things I've, quote, seen her in are probably actually trailers to things that I haven't seen.
That you haven't seen?
But most people have.
She's also, I just recently found this out, in one of the Conjuring movies, which is fun.
I haven't seen them.
Yeah, but that's a horror movie. We might not. That's a real horror movie. We might not touch that one.
Okay, wait. What is my one more thing? I don't even know. I think I feel like I have to just pretty much at random just throw darts at the board and mention.
Do it.
Mention
a few quotes or something.
A few quotes, a few things we haven't had a chance to talk about, because I do think we hit on the big things.
Are you? Is it a dart that you're concerned about, or are you nervous just to throw darts?
I've already talked about this, but I just came across the section in my notes where Eleanor first goes into where Marrow first shows Eleanor the conservatory.
Oh, yeah.
And she thinks she thinks it's this gorgeous space. I think it's a space that has potential because it is huge and has a spiral staircase. And if you're going to have a conservatory, of course it makes sense for there to be this gorgeous spiral metal staircase. But Eleanor's reaction is to, first of all, say it's beautiful, which is her reaction to the rest of the house. We've already discovered that. And then she sees a little patch of wilting violets. And she says, "Oh, violets! Someone must have died here." With exactly that tone. Joy. "Oh, violets! Someone must have died here."
You are correct. That is 100% the voice she has for that. Absolutely. Oh, you've seen her in 6 Feet Under.
I haven't seen 6 Feet Under.
Oh, I thought you did.
Mm-mm.
Oh, Pushing Daisies.
I have seen Pushing Daisies. You're right. I have seen. See, she's one of those people. I've seen half the things she's been in, but probably not the most popular things she's been in. Because 6 Feet Under is one of the more popular things she's been in, and I haven't seen that.
That's fair.
I have to ask a question, a very on-brand question for myself, which is, do you remember the scene where Luke was having a hard time falling asleep? And he's sitting in bed, and he's shooting candy into his mouth from some kind. What's that?
I don't know.
It was like a Pez dispenser, but like a Pez dispenser.
So motorized.
But motorized and round. Like a Pez dispenser, but projectiles. When
I tell you, I knew we were going to talk about this. While I was watching that scene, I was like, Danielle's going to have a question I'm not going to be able to answer.
What's that?
I don't know. I don't know what that was, but look, it's a perfect merch opportunity. They could have made something with it, and they didn't. Missed opportunity.
A Pez dispenser that's round and that shoots the candy into your mouth. I mean, it's an obvious choking hazard. No one should ever sell this thing.
Such a choking hazard. Absolutely. You have to aim it so that it hits your tongue in such a way so that you literally don't choke on the candy you just shot into your mouth. Did Wilson just have that on set?
Did they build it for the movie? Is it something that actually existed and then was pulled off the shelves because everyone realized immediately that this is going to kill children somewhere? I need to know.
Motorized Pez dispenser. Oh my God, I think it does actually exist. Wait, I think it does actually exist.
What is
No,
it?
what? Wait. Oh, no, wait. So that just moves, but does it shoot things into, like, there's one with, like...
He had it. It was like 6 inches away from, like a good 6 to 8 inches away from his face. And it was shooting the candy into his mouth.
Yeah. There's one that, like, very gently motorizes taking it out of the thing. Like, literally, It's like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. like Wile E. Coyote, like, has a tray that basically just goes, meh, and, like, turns and gives you one of these things. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that literally shoots into your mouth. Pume.
Someone built this. It exists because it exists in the movie. It
did exist in the movie. I think you're right. I think it was pulled from the shelves.
It's very dangerous. Okay, and my final thing was to mention the Dudleys, because we very lightly mentioned the Dudleys, but there's so much more than set dressing in this movie.
I know.
In the best way possible. And I think that they in a very funny way, Mrs. Dudley and Mr. sort of serve as sort of the bookends.
Yeah.
The bookends on this movie, because when they first show up, like the first thing that Mr. Dudley says is in response to Eleanor's question, which is, she arrives at the gate, it's locked, it's chained, and she's like, I'm looking for Mrs. Dudley. Are you Mr. Dudley, the caretaker? And he says, yes, I'm Mr. Dudley, the caretaker. Which is a very fishy way to respond to a question. And Mrs. Dudley...
It's like, I'm going to feed you back the exact same information that you know about me so that you don't learn anything else.
He could be anyone, anything. He could be a shapeshifter and still say that, you know?
He could be a shapeshifter.
Yes, I'm Mr. Dudley, the caretaker. And Mrs. Dudley's first appearance is in the kitchen with a cleaver, first of all. And second, that very ominous little speech that she recited to, I presume, every guest at the house, because she said the exact same thing to Theo that she said to Eleanor. Just like,
yes,
we all live in town. No one lives close to the house. When you call out at night for help, no one is going to be able to hear you. All that jazz, right?
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, that's Bruce Dern as Mr. Dudley, who is like a national treasure. Protect him at all costs. My dude is still alive. He is 88. Like, he's amazing. He's amazing. He's amazing in everything he does. One of these days I will show you The Burbs, which is my favorite Bruce Dern thing. Is Laura Dern's father. He's just like absolutely Hollywood royalty. He's also very funny. Like, if you give him a chance to be funny, he's hilarious. And I think it's Marianne Seldes is Mrs. Dudley. Yeah. Who just also, I believe she was like 81 in that part. And I was just like, dang. Like, unfortunately, she passed away in 2014. But like, damn. Like, she commands so much presence.
It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that they have a really solid comedic presence, because they set up the movie for us, right? They are the ones who immediately make the house ominous. And then at the end of the movie, what are their lines? Mrs. Dudley.
People.
City people. Exactly! That's what I'm saying!
I know.
Dr. Marrow, did you discover what you were looking for?
Drag him.
They're perfect. And I love
absolutely them. 10-10. No, yeah, the Dudleys are great. The Dudleys are also in the book. They're just as, I would say, just as weirdly mercurial. Like, the husband is a little more surly and a little more like, you know, he really gives Eleanor like a problem when she shows up and is just like, who are you? What are you doing here? You know, and she's kind of flustered and she's just like, I'm expected. And he's like, are you? I don't know who you are. And it's just like, you know, like he really gives it to her first. So I am kind of glad that we just had like two snarky elders.
It's perfect.
Yes, absolutely. The TV show, which, by the way, friends, if you haven't seen The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, highly recommend. We will probably not be watching it for this show because it definitely has some unfortunate cat death, and I will not put Danielle through that.
Not only unfortunate cat death, but I've heard that it's legitimately scary, unlike this movie, which was not scary. And so, no, I will not be watching.
It does also have, like, creepy children.
I will not be watching the show because it is legitimately scary.
It is also legitimately scary. But I do highly recommend it to folks who might want a different take. They do some really interesting things with it. Mr. and Mrs. Dudley also tend to come across a little more, like, sympathetic in the show. They're still weird and kind of creepy, but, like, they have more layers than I think even the book gives them. So I appreciated, like, the alternate take.
They wouldn't approach a house of clearly very traumatized people and say, city people.
There is a dead body in the house behind them.
There are two dead bodies. There are 2 dead bodies in the house behind. Actually, there are 2 recently dead bodies, and then there are
Bones
easily 20. Like the bodies of 20 children also.
Yes.
Just all of the things.
All of the things. It's a lot. I do, just while we're talking about the ending, I kind of love that Dr. Moreau and Theo just walk out of there shocked. Don't even say anything to Mr. and Mrs. Dudley. They literally just walk down the path back to, I don't even, like, is there a taxi? We don't know. They're just walking back to the main street. Are they going to, like, hitchhike back to the airport? Where's your luggage, sir, ma'am? Like,
none of that is important. They're going to get into the back seat of the Dudley's car and head back to town. Everything else.
Wait. They're not even going to say anything. They're not going to say that there are dead bodies in the house. They're just going to sit in the car and wait. Anyway, on that note, because I know Danielle has to leave, we should probably wrap up.
We're going to wrap up. Everyone watched the movie. We talked about 20% of it at best.
I will say it's a visually interesting movie. I think your eye sort of goes to a bunch of different things. It definitely has an identity crisis, which we talked about. Mm-hmm. So don't expect a very cohesive plot, but
like, like if it's like, it's a Thursday night and you're looking for something to do. You've got some watchret in your hand and you would like to turn your brain off. This is a fantastic movie for that. Have the watchret, watch the movie, enjoy. And
absolutely.
With that, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can tell us about a time you thought you were haunted. You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/clockpod.
That's right. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones. Tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time. Hard to say. It's also one of those things where, like, you run into the problem. Mm-hmm. You run into the problem of having this moth is going to kill me. You run into the problem of having a guy who's trying to do a fear study, but he's not exactly doing anything else other than telling them a quote unquote